people in 2008 lost so much money because it wasn't the people that were buying Cashflow, right? Those guys are very rich right now. The guys that lost all their money are the guys that were putting getting loans 125% LTV, right? The guys that are flipping and trying to make a quick buck that didn't know what they were doing.
So the question is this: how do most agents find the secrets to succeed in today's competitive real estate market, especially when the top agents are keeping those secrets to themselves? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. Hi, I'm Aaron Amuchastegui, and welcome to Real Estate Rockstars.
Real Estate Rockstars is your host, Aaron Amuchastegui. Today I get to interview Craig Curelop. So Craig has been on all sorts of podcasts out there. He wrote some books. Right now he lives in Denver, Colorado. His real estate team out there is agents who are also investors. So I think that they do a lot of focus on investing through real estate. We're going to get to talk about a lot of stuff, including his book and what he's been working on and everything else in Denver. So Craig, thanks for joining me on the show.
Aaron, thanks so much for having me on, man. I've been looking forward to this for some time now.
That's awesome. So you live in Denver, and I think you said you've lived there for 4 or 5 years.
Yep, just about 4 years.
Okay. And what's it like out there right now? Just in general, like it could be COVID, real estate. What's it like to live in Denver over the last year?
Yeah. So, Denver's obviously an amazing place, super outdoorsy and all that kind of stuff. So, all the people out here are, pretty fit, pretty healthy, which is a lifestyle I really like to abide by. Mm-hmm. In terms of the real estate market, I think it's pretty similar to anywhere else in the country where it is just absolutely exploding, blowing up. Last January, February, like just before COVID, it was insane. Things were going for, $40, $50, $60, $70,000 above list price pretty consistently. Then COVID hit. Everything shut down in the big scare, right? When kind of the whole country shut down, and even real estate business even shut down. But I was still kind of doing some, talking with the agents and just saying, hey, like, is there any way we can just come check it out? Like kind of under the table, whatever it is, and they were like, yeah, we just want to sell this house. And so, once COVID hit, we were doing deals like super easy, right? Below asking, no competition. Like, it was a really good time to buy for my clients in April, May of 2020. Then, COVID kind of became the new norm and things kind of started to open up for a while. Things got back to normal, but now more recently, kind of like, we're recording this January of 2021, I'd say like, it's kind of in the middle, it's not totally open like Florida, but it's not, totally shut down like California. We're kind of like somewhere in between where restaurants are operating at 25% capacity. There's absolutely showings allowed. They try not to overlap the showings. There's no open houses that are happening, but we're still trying to do business.
Yeah. You're the first person that's actually candidly like admitted or talked about the idea that in April and May, you could get houses for a deal, right? People have said like, COVID happened and prices just went up even more and the real estate market's been booming. But my listeners have heard me say I took a risk and I had an extra house in March and I listed it 10% below what it should have listed at because I was so terrified. And I was like, I just need to sell this house. I don't want an extra house going into the biggest crisis of our lives. Well, I was wrong, but man, the people that were willing to go show the houses back in April, May, they could get good deals because we were afraid. I'd even bought a brand new house and moved into it. And I remember being like, man, I wish I had my down payment back. I'm a little worried that I bought this big house right before, we're about to have this economic crisis. And so it was one of the places you said where you couldn't even really you could kind of show houses, but they didn't even really like that. I know a lot of places said that real estate was essential early on, or agents were allowed to go and do like virtual showings. Had that been a thing? Were your clients going with you or were you doing virtual showings?
It was largely virtual showings. In some cases, the clients came with me, in particular if the house was vacant and there wasn't really an issue, and if the listing agent didn't really care. And so that's kind of like, I always made sure that, all parties were okay with it. But at the end of the day, the listing agent wants to sell the house. Like my client wants to buy the house. And I was telling my clients, I was like, look, this is an opportunity we're never going to see again. There's a 2-month window here, or at the time we didn't know how long the window would be, but we figured it was a pretty short window of like super scaredness to a new normal. And we needed to like hit this window in order to get deals. While I think showing appointments were down 88%. And I'm like, damn, am I the only one showing houses? Right? Like, this is amazing, right? It was like shooting fish in a barrel there in those couple of months. And, we got some pretty good deals out of it.
That is, that's really good insight, and good for you that you guys pushed so hard at the beginning, because it was such a nerve-wracking time. It was like, there's always big opportunity when you eliminate competition, right? 100%. And you take risks. That's why I love investing in courthouse step foreclosures, because there's not a lot of competition at it most of the time. And when there is a lot of competition, then I need to go find a different area or a different something, because I like not having competition. And there's the old saying that if you don't do what everybody else does, right? So if everybody's afraid, you should take some risks, and if everybody's taking risks, then you should be afraid. And you went through that mantra, and then the fact you got some good deals out of it, that's pretty awesome. How long have you been a real estate agent?
So I've had my license since November 2017. So like a little over 3 years. However, for those first 2 years, I was only an agent for myself.
Okay.
So I've also starting really in August of 2019 was the first time I accepted a client that was not myself, and slowly realized that there was a niche here of people wanting to get into house hacks and people wanting to get into investment properties. And there was really no agent, or at least very few agents out there that could guide someone from looking at houses to running the numbers, to giving them contractors, to basically just being their coach the entire way from initial conversation all the way till close, and even past close. And when it comes to managing the property and getting tenants and all that kind of stuff. And, especially first time investors really value that. And so that was kind of how I differentiated myself from the other agents in the market, and had a pretty successful last year and a half.
Yeah. So you got your license in 2017, but that was just so you could buy investment properties. Did you already own investment properties at the time? Had you bought some prior and decided you were going for it? When did you buy your first house?
Yeah. So I bought my first house in June 2017. So that was my first house hack. That I was not an agent for. I was represented by another agent. And in November 2017, like I just said, I got my license. So that way on my second and third one, I did myself. And then I realized man, if I can get an extra 10 grand here and there for each sale I do, that's not a bad gig. Yeah. So I helped a buddy out who wanted a house hack. I helped another buddy out who wanted the house hack. And I was like, man, this is kind of nice. There's worse things in the world than getting 10 grand to death, And so I was pretty happy.
Especially if you're trying to be an agent yourself. You're like, hey, yeah, getting this extra commission is going to help pay for the new appliances for the house, or any of your other investments or down payments or all sorts of stuff.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, most recently we just, me and my lender actually teamed up for a deal most recently, and he got a good rate because he was the lender. Right. And I basically had the seller pay down our closing costs, as well as paying down our rate instead of paying me commission. So we got our most recent investment property at 2.25% for a 30-year fixed investment property. And you just it's so hard to lose, right? With those rates.
That's really interesting. So you're instead of paying me a commission, so you're writing the offer and saying, hey, no buyer's agent commission. So you're going to save 3% there, but instead you're going to spend 3% to buy down the rate. So you get to buy the property. You don't get taxed on your income at that point. And then now you have a 2% rate forever. So tell me about the first house that you bought. So before you got an agent, what was that experience like? Why did you decide to buy one? And, tell us about that process.
For sure. Yeah. So I was basically just gung ho on financial independence, and I saw real estate as the fastest way to get there, right? Rental income exceeds your expenses, you're financially free, and you can start taking bigger risks. And so house hacking was the obvious first choice as someone with not a whole lot of money. I maybe had 40 or 50,000 at the time. And also it's just so much easier because when you go home to your investment, it's if something breaks, you're just going home to fix it, right? It's on the weekend, you go upstairs or whatever it is. It's super easy, and you're always seeing what's going on at the house. And so that first property I bought was a duplex, top, bottom, both one bed, one bath, totally renovated. It was basically a flip. And the reason why I bought a flip was, which is kind of against the grain, right? Like you hear a lot of people say, oh, you want to buy these fixer uppers and all that kind of stuff. But like for a house hack, I totally disagree, because you want to get in, get it rented, and start saving for your next house hack as quick as you can. So that was my thought there. So I went in, I rented out the top unit, lived in the bottom, but that top unit wasn't quite covering my mortgage. And so what I did was I rented my bedroom out on Airbnb, and I lived behind a curtain in this like room divider in the living room on a futon for a year. And that really propelled me, because that was an extra $1,100 a month. I was living for free, plus making about $600 a month on Cashflow. And that really set the foundation for me to buy my second, third, fourth, fifth. Now I've got like 14 units and so on. So.
Wow. So like a traditional house hack is somebody, maybe not traditional, but an example of a house hack would be somebody buys a 4-bedroom house. They move into one of the bedrooms and then they rent out the other rooms by the room. So whereas a house would maybe normally rent for $1,500 a month for the house hack numbers, if you're renting out the rooms individually, you could charge a little bit more. So maybe the house rents for $2,000 instead. Is there a rule of thumb that when you're doing that analysis that says, oh, I could normally rent this for $1,500, so I can now rent it for $2,000? Or do you do deep analysis on every property? Like how much more do you get to rent it for when you get to house hack a house?
So in Denver, right, if you're going to buy like I think the 5-bed, 3-bathroom houses are really the best for a house hack in the sense that you're describing with the rent by the room style. And so a 5-bedroom, 3-bathroom house will rent for about $2,700 generally. If you were to rent it out by the room, you're getting $3,700, $3,800 pretty easily. So typically it's about $1,000 more per month by the room than it would be as a traditional single family unit. And so I think it's super beneficial in your first few properties to buy it and do it rent by the room, right? Because you want to get as much cash flow as you can at first. It is more work. It is harder. It's harder to find a property manager to do it. Like those are all the downsides to it. But once you can like get your nest egg to a certain amount, you can always switch it back to a single family home. Sure, you take less cash flow, but it's, at that point you're looking to scale. Right. And so you can't really scale the rent by the room strategy, or at least I'm sure you can. It's just much more difficult too.
Yeah. So you bought that first duplex and so that version of it was like, you're going to rent out one side and live in the other. Did you know right away you were going to end up sharing your half of the duplex too? Or did you first look at that and say, I could rent out one side and live in the other and be okay?
No, I knew I was going to be living in the living room. It was kind of one of those things that I wanted to do. Just because, I had that Dave Ramsey quote in my head where, live like no one else now so you can live like they dreamed later. So yeah. I was like, how can I put myself in like the worst possible position to make the most possible money and just see where it takes me, right?
So you slept in a living room behind a curtain and rented out your room on Airbnb. Would people that stayed there in Airbnb were they like, dude, this is crazy, you're living behind a curtain? Or were they like, cool, thanks for giving us the room? Like, what was that part like? I think a lot of people listening would be like, what? Like, and you made the sacrifice and now you're doing great. But like, so what was that like?
Yeah. So it's funny, like no one really even questioned it. I think people just thought I was broke and needed someone and just needed to make some money from my house. Right. But I would have really genuine conversations with a lot of the roommates or the guests coming in and out, every 3 to 5 days. 2 or 3 of them I'm honestly still in touch with today. Right. Like 4 years later. And so I made some good friends throughout this whole process. And really, I'm a huge traveler too. So it satisfied my travel bug, right? Like meeting people from Australia, New Zealand, Poland, all over the US. It's just like, it was cool. It was actually like really fun for a year. It was really fun.
Yeah. Rockstar Nation, this is Aaron Amuchastegui with a quick commercial break from our sponsor, Rent Ready. And this one is all about maintenance. Did you know the number one reason that a tenant leaves a rental is lack of response around maintenance? With Rent Ready's brand new 24/7 maintenance service plans, you can have your maintenance managed for you. It also includes emergency services. Rent Ready, the property management app, recently added more support for landlords. Not only can you get hands-off maintenance coordination to troubleshoot your tenant's repairs for you, but you can also streamline your rental property cash flow with increased rental retention rates. With Rent Ready, you can sleep in on the weekends knowing your repairs are handled from start to finish. In addition to making maintenance, you can manage everything else easier too, like collecting rents, listing units, screening tenants, and signing leases, all from the phone in your hand. Get luxury-style maintenance services for your tenants and free weekends for yourself when you sign up for Rent Ready. I want to add a couple things in here too. I had interviewed Ryan Barone, the founder of Rent Ready, in episode 939. So if you want to hear more about Rent Ready and what they've done, go check out that episode with Ryan. And when it comes to maintenance, you guys have heard me say, I have a ton of rental properties. And one of the things I did after owning those for about a year was start to outsource the nighttime calls. There's nothing worse than getting a call at 10 or 11 at night saying my air conditioner's not working, my heater's not working. And it looks like, and I used to have to go to like 10 different companies to do that. One for my rents, one for my property management, one for the repairs. And it looks like Rent Ready is doing all of that in one package. So for this month only, you can still try Rent Ready for 1 year and only for $1 when you use our special code ROCKSTAR. Use code ROCKSTAR and sign up for Rent Ready's annual plan at rentredy.com. That's RENTREDI.com. Use the code ROCKSTAR and you can get Rent Ready for a whole year for just $1.
So what's the average Airbnb person that's coming to rent your room and share the house with you? What are they there in Denver for? Just for travel themselves?
Yeah, I'd say 80% of the time it was a couple, just traveling, looking to see Denver. They were in town for a Broncos game or a Rockies game. Maybe they were just driving through town. Sometimes they were just going up to, spend a few days in Denver, then wanted to head up to the mountains for a few days. I think anyone who comes to Denver, I think the mountains are 100% better than Denver. Like Denver without the mountains is, no offense to anyone from like Milwaukee, but I say it's like Milwaukee, right? Not as great or sexy as a city. But if you were to, but if you're going to come to Denver, to the mountains, you might as well see Denver while you're here. Right. And so that's kind of why I think people stay for 2-3 nights. And yeah, it worked out pretty well.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many mountains there. There's so many ski places within a couple hours of Denver. You fly into Denver for all of them. I mean, the first time I went up to Breck and Aspen and some of those places, you fly into Denver, then you've got a 2-hour drive or something to get up there. So I could see people staying longer. And I guess I flew into Denver once a couple of years ago. I mean, I'm sure it's not happening today, but every hotel in the city was booked. It was like, oh, we're going to Denver tonight. And it was like, had to make a choice last minute to go there for a business thing. And I got there and there wasn't a single hotel that had any availability. And I was thinking, that's crazy. Cause I got on the plane thinking I'll just book one when I get there. And it was like 100% occupancy in the city. And there must've been a game or something going on. But I could see that if there's if there's high demand for hotels there, that people are actually saying like, maybe that helps out with your Airbnb, but you don't Airbnb a room anymore and live in the living room anymore, I'm assuming.
No, I'm past that. That was only year one. And then I kind of, in the book, I talk about the comfort continuum, which, on one side is comfortability, the other side is profitability. And, at first I like to stretch on that side of profitability as much as you can. And then as you get your second and third one, you've got more passive income, you start to become wealthier, you slowly move towards comfortability, sacrificing some profit, but no one wants to live behind a curtain for the rest of their lives. So.
Yeah, I love that. So you bought that one and then you said, okay, now I'm going to, and you're saving money by living in the living room. So then you're like, maybe I can also save money by becoming an agent. And so at first you were just an agent yourself to buy your properties. And then, but it was like 2019, I think you said, okay, I'm actually going to be an agent now for other people too. So you had done deals, but you didn't have to do any of you had to do the agent skills of essentially you were transaction coordinating your own deal, but you were also underwriting the investment deal, but you hadn't really been an agent yet. So I would say 2019 is when you actually got to be an agent. And once you had a client, what was your first deal like when you started doing it for clients? Was it just buddies wanting house hacks too, and you found them, or what was the niche?
So the first one was just my buddy who wanted to house hack, and he knew that I had house hacked 3 times and was like, well, if there's anyone that's going to find me a house hack in Denver, it's going to be you. And so I just want to do exactly what you did. And so I was like, okay, well, that's easy enough. We found him a 5-bedroom, 2-bathroom house. It was a flip, totally redone. He lived in the downstairs, the bigger room downstairs. And, he actually added a bedroom. So it was a 4-2, but he turned it into a 5-2. Okay. And now he rents out all 5 of those bedrooms. He's making probably a little over $3,000 a month, and his mortgage is a little over $2,000. Yeah. So, yeah.
So how many deals did you do in 2019?
2019, I probably did 8 or 9 deals.
Okay. And then what's the average sales price in Denver, or where of the deals you do?
So in Denver, average size was probably in 2019, it was around 400,000, right? 2020, I had like a crazy year. Like it went up a lot more than that. But yeah, so that was my 2019. So it was about, I mean, it ends up being about 10 grand, 10 to 12 grand a transaction on a commission basis.
Okay. So 2019, you had a good year, and a good year when it came to, hey, you were kind of doing this extra on the side. You did 9 transactions and you made 10 grand a piece. And it was, looking at deals along the way. Were you still buying more houses for yourself too?
At that time, I was just buying like one house hack a year. Okay. And so I had purchased my house hack in 2019. I didn't make any other purchases in 2019. I was under contract for 3 out-of-state purchases at the end of 2019, but we ended up closing in 2020.
Okay. So then 2020 hits, and your first couple months, you were able, I guess what also made it easier for you to take advantage of the situation is you were on all those, were you representing investors? Was it all house hacks? Was anybody like trying to buy to go move in, or was it just as an investment basis?
I think every single one of my clients, except one, was a house hack or investor. The one that was not wanted to invest in wanted to turn it into a rental in a few years. Yeah. So I guess there's a half a person that wasn't like an investor.
Yeah, you still got to put your eyes on it in that investment way. But at least you got to take the emotion out of it. So whereas a lot of families were probably not wanting to buy in April and May, your investors were like, hey, go get me a deal. I still want to buy another house and rent it out as long as it cash flows right. So that's where you were in this unique situation where there wasn't emotion tied to a deal or moving and, getting a deal now. They were kind of, you had some well-trained investors to get to do that. So then by May, June, it started to be, the real estate market started to go up. Were your clients the rest of the time in 2020? Did you start to have more people that were actually trying to live in the house, or was it all investor or mostly investor type people?
So it's that combination, right? They wanted to live in the house and it's an investor. So I would say most of the clients are house hackers. So I'd probably say 70 or so % are house hackers. The rest 30 are just traditional buy and hold investors. And so for the house hackers, they were trying to live in the house and they were trying to, cash flow it when they moved out. Now, I would say that there is a decent bit of emotion in there, more so than traditional investors, because these guys, they're putting 20 or 30 grand down. And when it's your first investment, most of the guys I'm working with and girls I'm working with are young, right? They're in their 20s, and 30 grand is most of their life savings. And so, we're kind of working with them to make an investment that is the largest investment of their lives. And there is a little bit of emotion there, not emotion of like, oh, the cabinets aren't the right color, but just like, what happens if I don't get the place filled, right? Oh my God, the inspection comes back and holy crap, right? And so coaching them through the inspection and coaching them through any like low appraisals and helping them see the forest through the trees is really what I think I got good at in 2020.
Yeah. I guess it's a great point. When I think of investors, when I go buy a house as an investor, it's like, does it pencil? Right. And so it's easy for me to say it's not an emotional, it's a business decision. But even in April and May, I was emotional because I was a stressed out investor going, I don't want to invest in anything right now. The sky's falling. But you're right. So I guess the other side is they're also going to live there. Like they're going to live there. And for them, it's a temporary place to live. So maybe they don't have the same emotion as living there forever, but it is their life savings. They do have to decide, like, is this laid out in a way that we could have roommates without feeling weird and things like that. So what are some of the ways that you cater to investors, or if somebody's an agent out there right now and they want to start adding, representing investors to their tool belt, what would you recommend?
Well, the first thing you have to do is invest yourself, right? Because as an investor, you don't want to work with someone that's not an investor. Like if you're going to talk the talk, you got to walk the walk. And that is the number one thing. Number two thing is you also have to start learning the language of an investor. You need to start talking like an investor. You have to start thinking like an investor. So if you walk into a house, if I walk into a house, like I couldn't tell you about the oak cabinets and the year, right? Like I'll tell you, hey, what year is the furnace? What year is the AC? When are you going to need to replace the roof? Like what are some like minor upgrades you could do to increase rents? Like that's the stuff you want your realtor to tell you. And you also want them to maybe help you help you, as a realtor, you want to tell your client, hey, how much is this going to cost you? Right. And then how much increase in rent are you going to get because of this thing? And is it worth it or is it not worth it? And I would say in most cases, people, at least in Denver, like people want to rent in Denver. And so if you go crazy with upgrades, you're really not going to get a huge return. People just want to live in Denver. They don't care about the place, especially as a rental. And so you also want to make sure that you're catering to your target market, right? You don't want to have the nicest house in the neighborhood with quartz countertops and all that. I've made that mistake, right? Try to make it the nicest house in the neighborhood, and then you still can't get the rent because it's not the great neighborhood. So,
yeah. I love that first piece of advice you gave, that if someone wants to represent investors, because investors are great clients for real estate agents because they're usually repeat clients. You're usually going to do, anyone can be a repeat client for a real estate agent, but investors tend to be repeat clients more often. Whereas somebody might move from their house every 3 to 4 years, an investor might have you help them buy a house every year or every 2 years. Like that's going to be their goal. So they get to be repeat more often. So getting to go invest yourself, as an agent, if you're wanting to represent investors, to go try it. So if you want to go try house hacks or you want to go try any sort of investing, being able to buy it yourself so you can walk the walk and talk the talk, I think that's really important. And I think 2020 taught us to diversify. I wish that all agents were investors, because in most of 2020, the businesses that I have that I used to make money for every month, buying and selling foreclosures, that has gone to nowhere because of foreclosure moratoriums. But the stuff that has made us money this year was our investments before. And so being diversified out there, agents, like Craig got to talk about, like, hey, I got this commission and I'm getting that extra money, thinking of the commission as extra money to go towards something. Maybe the first transaction covers your bills and the second transaction goes toward your future investments. And then I really like the thing you said, like one of the differences between rentals and flips or other investments is if you put, $10,000 worth of upgrades in a house, really high-end appliances, granite countertops, great flooring, great thing of that, you are usually going to sell it for more than $10,000 more than you were, right? You're going to add 10,000 upgrades and you're going to sell it for $20,000 more. Well, rent is a lot different because there's these parts of rent that just don't get any higher, right? There's certain neighborhoods. I bought this apartment complex in a small town in Texas. And my plan was, hey, the rents are really low right now. They were like, $600 a unit. Maybe they were less. And I was like, I'm going to rehab them all and put in, new cabinets, new granite, new appliances, new flooring. And I'm going to be able to rent it for so much more. And I only got to rent it for like $25 more. Because what I learned hard about that neighborhood is it was a neighborhood where people just weren't going to pay more than $675. No matter where I got to, they couldn't afford it. Anyone that could afford more was going to go live in a different neighborhood. So you do have to look at our ROI a lot differently with rentals. What are some of the things that when you did do improvements to houses, it really helped your rental ROI for regular investments or house hacks or anything?
So I would say paint goes a very long way.
Yeah.
Painting the trim and the walls. Floors go a decent way, if the carpet is ratty and all that kind of stuff. And really it's kitchens and bathrooms that people fall in love with. And you don't need to make kitchen. You don't need quartz countertops, right? I think granite countertops are perfectly fine, especially for a rental. They're a little bit more durable and also a little bit cheaper. One thing my girlfriend did, which actually worked out really well for her, was there was this like vinyl rollout, basically like tape stuff, right? And you can turn like a Formica looking countertop into a butcher block looking countertop, right? Mm-hmm. So it doesn't, and the tenants, they're not real estate professionals, right? They're literally looking for a place to live. And one of them actually is looking to invest in real estate. He's like, oh, whoa, you got nice butcher block countertops. And you couldn't even notice, right? Unless you really look. And so stuff like that for rentals actually may go a long way. And, it costs just such a little bit amount of money.
So what about your guy your recent deal, or your friend that added a bedroom, mm-hmm. right? So what does it cost to add a bedroom in a house, and and how much extra did that add to his projected rent?
Yeah. So adding a bedroom, especially for rent by the room, is probably one of the most valuable things you can do. And it also adds value to a house. And so, right. So the place was 4-bedroom, 2-bath, and it was 2,000 square feet. Any house with 2,000 square feet in Denver, likely you can add a 5th bedroom. And so what that consisted of was basically just like cutting off a piece of the basement, putting up a wall and adding a door and running some electrical through that wall. That totaled him about $1,600.
Wow.
And I've heard people do it for as little as 800 and as much as 2,000. And so let's say it's the absolute max, right? Let's say you don't get a good deal and you do it for $2,000 to add that wall. He's making an extra $650 a month because he added that bedroom. He's paid back for that $2,000 in under 3 months, right? So that is one of the best strategies, is to add a bedroom.
It seems like so it seems like that. Like adding a bedroom, if you've got the square foot, even if it was going to cost you $10,000 to add a bedroom, because it was more complicated or something like that. If you're adding $600 a month, you look at that investment. Like if I could buy a house for $10,000 and if it rented for $100 a month, I'd be happy, right? So when you get to essentially adding a room is like buying a house for $10,000, but it rents for $650. That seems like there's probably a big strategy in that, finding houses in Denver that only have 3 rooms that are big and splitting that living room up into other things. What are the biggest problems you've had with house as a landlord? Like, have you had many problems with like people sharing rooms? Do people fight? Do people disagree? Do they tell you, hey, kick this guy out, we don't like him anymore? Like what's the worst part about house hacking?
That is probably the worst part. I would say if you do a good job at screening your tenants and creating a culture within your house, then you're not going to run into those issues as frequently. Before I learned all this stuff, right, I'm kind of learning as I go too. I did not do that. And I just kind of accepted the first people. The first few months were okay. But then, there was some animosity at some points, and, there was some yelling and some fighting and all that. And I've had to kind of play mom and dad for a while. But eventually they moved out and it was fine. They always paid rent and all that kind of stuff. So it was good. And yeah, I mean, that is, it's a downside that you have to highlight, right? Absolutely. It's a risk and it's a downside. Now, one thing that we've done and a lot of my clients have done recently is you basically niche your house out. So, snowboarding and rock climbing are really big things to do here in Denver area. And so it's, rock climbers paradise or snowboard heaven kind of place to live. And you're going to attract, once they did that, they started attracting snowboarders, they started attracting climbers, people that they actually liked and wanted to hang out with. And now they're all friends, right? They're going snowboarding together. They're going climbing together. They're doing all these things together. So if you are going to do the rent by the room strategy, I think that would be the biggest piece of advice, would be to like target who you want to live there.
Yeah, I could see that. Like finding marketing to the people that are going to share your lifestyle, especially if you're living in one of the rooms and renting out the rest of them. Is it harder to evict somebody if they're just renting a room? Are there different laws for people that are just renting a room? Is it easier, harder, anything different?
So I've never had to evict anybody renting by the room, and that's saying something right there, right? Yeah. So I would say it is going to be harder to evict someone for renting by the room, because the sheriff isn't going to come up and put a notice of eviction on someone's bedroom door, right? Yeah. It's the address in the house, and so really. There's a couple ways that you can kind of mitigate this risk, right? One way is, and a lot of people do this, is you just sign everybody to month leases. If someone is horrible, you just say, hey, you've got 30 days. We're gonna move out. We're gonna terminate this lease. A lot of people do that. One time I did have to kick someone out, and I did cash for keys. And if you want to get into it, we can. It's kind of a funny story.
So we'll talk about that. So what was you had a tenant that wasn't good, and so what did you tell him?
Yeah. So I had 2 tenants and I got greedy here during a rehab, and they wanted to live in the bedrooms outside of where the construction was happening. And I got greedy and I said yes. And I charged them a pretty cheap amount, and they were, doing hard illegal drugs downstairs in the basement. And I was like, I found out, I called the cops. The cops couldn't do anything for some reason. I guess it's legal to do these hard illegal drugs in your bedroom. And so I basically said, hey, you guys need to get out in the next week. I will give you all of your rent you've ever paid me, your entire security deposit, and $500 to get out in the next week. And they got out in the next week, and it was fine, all good and dandy. But I got lucky, right? If they caused a fuss, it could have been a lot harder. And so, many lessons learned there. 1, don't be greedy. 2, always screen your tenants. That was the one time I didn't screen my tenants. And, 3, again, especially if you're going to do this rent by the room strategy, eviction is a lot harder. So that's a good question you asked.
It's really interesting stuff, right? Because when you look at, as investors right now, we buy a lot of houses that we rent out the house, right? But it's tougher and tougher to find deals right now, tougher and tougher to find cash flow. So we've thought about, hey, is it worth trying to, be an investor and buy a house and rent all 4 rooms out, right, to individual people? And how would that be? And it's like the return goes up, the risk probably goes up a little, depending on where it is, or the strategy. But as agents too, getting to learn and know about all these strategies just helps you be a better agent, helps you present opportunities for your people. So Craig, how many deals did you do in 2020?
Like 95.
95. That's crazy. So in 2019, you did like 9, you said.
Yeah.
You did 9 deals. And then but you had a couple in escrow at the end of 2019. So you started off your 2020 with a few closings right away. Mm-hmm. But how many closings did you do before COVID went weird?
So I did about 6 before March.
So you had done 6, average, a little bit better than the year prior, but so you were on pace to do 24 for the year. Mm-hmm. And then March hit and nobody was selling. And so you went to your investors and said, hey, now is a great time to be able to buy more because no one else is doing that and we can get good deals. How many did you get during that period of, hey, we can get good deals?
Yeah. So March was when COVID really got big, right? And so closings would have happened in April, May, and June. Mm-hmm. So April wasn't great, right? April, I guess, I only did 2 in April. May, I did like 8. And then June, I did 11.
Wow.
So that is where a lot of the momentum came from for sure. And then we really just, continued that. And I was nervous because I don't know, in those unprecedented times, you can't really look back at like April, May, and June and think that July, August, and September are going to be any different, are going to be better. Right.
Yeah.
And so, but they were better. So we just started really kind of crushing it.
Man, none of us could have predicted any of this stuff. I mean, somebody probably did. There's probably smart people out there that predicted a lot of it, but most of the decisions I made in the last 9 months were, most. I got half of my guesses right and half of my guesses wrong along the way for what would be a good deal and what wouldn't. So if you were going to go back and give yourself advice now, I mean, you've been an active agent for a couple of years, right? And so I guess one of the big things I would say is, hey, don't discount being a specialized niche agent and investor. Because Craig did 90 something deals this year. And he just got his license a couple of years ago. And you're a young guy and you started with people that were first time home buyers and your niche ended up really helping you break through up there. I mean, your numbers were huge. There's a lot of people that had great 2020s, but not very many people that have been agents for 2 years that had great 2020s, mm-hmm. right? Like that was one of the unique things. Like people that were doing great before crushed it last year. The people that were just getting started had a really rough year. So there's something to be said about just investing and niching. But what advice would you give a new agent right now? Or do you wish someone would have told you when you got started? Like, what have you learned something in real estate that you're like, oh, I wish I would have done this instead?
Well, I guess one thing I wish I would have done instead is, we're creating a team now. So I would wish that I probably started the team thing earlier because I did run myself ragged last year. However, as a new agent, especially if you want to niche out in like an investor type approach, you want to make sure that you're documenting your stuff and you want to put it on social media and you want to, if you got a newsletter, send it out to your clients, let them know what deals they're doing in Denver. I mean, I've got a lot of clients that were just like, how much can you cash flow in Denver? Like, how are you getting $1,000 a month in cash flow? Like on all of these deals, like, is it too good to be true? And we're like, no, I can point to like 35 deals where we're cash flowing $1,000 or more, right? It's very easy, very consistent. You just have to be a little bit creative. And, I just tell them, hey, this is what you have to do to cash flow that much. And these are areas you have to be in. And people get pretty excited about it. And then they start telling their friends and really just kind of spirals from there.
So sharing your wins and sharing how good of a deal it was really helped people start asking you. And you mentioned a newsletter plus social media. But yeah, I think that would do that too. I think being able to say, hey, this is a $400,000 investment that cash flows this much after all, mortgage, and people want to invest in real estate right now. Like it's no secret, like people want to do it, but everybody says, I can't get a good deal. It doesn't cash flow. So you need to say like, hey, we've got great cash flow. That's like the That's like, it used to be like the auto dealerships in the newspaper would say, this car, 10 grand. And then you'd get there, like, well, we had one of those for 10 grand, but now we have this one for 25 that's left. But you were able to go like, hey, this house makes you that much money. And they're like, really? And you're like, no, really? That's how we do it. That sounds like a great way. So you share your wins and you get to, keep building it up. What do you think is going to be the number one way for agents to succeed in 2021?
I think it's really going to be, man, that's a tough question. As guys say, if you're successful now, if you consider yourself successful now, I would say continue doing what you're doing and maybe just double down on it. Right. Also, a lot of it is going to be people are going to speculate and think there's going to be this stock market crash and this, real estate crash that's going to happen. And you really just have to tell them, especially if you're an investor minded agent, that like, it does not matter what the market does, right? The market, we're going to make sure that your property cash flows you when the market's up, when the market's down, and when the market stays the same. So no matter what happens, you never are in a position where you're forced to sell. And you explain to them that the people in 2008 lost so much money because it wasn't the people that were buying cash flow, right? Those guys are very rich right now. The guys that lost all their money are the guys that were putting getting loans 125% LTV, right? The guys that are flipping and trying to make a quick buck that didn't know what they were doing. And really just the inexperienced folks is who lost a lot of money in real estate back in 2008. And so you kind of put that all into perspective. And also the whole thing where, people think real estate's going to go down because it went down, 10 years ago in the last recession. I mean, before that, real estate hadn't really gone down significantly since like the 1930s, right? Despite the fact the stock market had multiple recessions since then. And you look at this whole COVID thing and who it's impacting, right? It's impacting mostly, bartenders, waiters, right? The kind of people that don't make a lot of money on paper, who can't afford to buy houses anyway, right? It's mostly the renters that are being affected. And so to think that real estate is going to have anywhere near of a impact that did in 2008, I think is foolish. And maybe it drops a little bit, or maybe it slows a little bit. But again, cash flow is king.
Yeah. I think that's great advice when you're buying for cash flow. When we first started investing in like 2014, 2015, man, we remembered the crash. We remembered it deeply. We were building houses. We remember the foreclosures. We remember all the different crazy workouts. And so every time we refinanced, we would always be like, we're worried about a crash. Like I'm always worried about like that crash. And so anytime we would finance, we're like, well, is this note long enough that we'll cash flow through whatever up and down? Like, so the buying cash flow, being able to do that works in up market, houses can go up 10, 20, 30%, down 10, 20, 30%. Rent doesn't go up and down at the same percentage. And if it does, so if your house that you're renting for $1,400, you have to rent for $1,200 now. That's not going to break the bank, right? It shouldn't, or you're not investing. If you're going to spend, lose $2,400 a year on your rental investment, like that's a crisis in rentals. I guess a crisis in rentals is people not paying and not being able to be evicted, and hopefully there's more government intervention to help with that right now. But short of this weird time of people being able to not pay rent and not have anything, a $200 a month correction would be like, oh, that's a big rental correction. And but when you have a 20% correction on value and people are 90%, levered on a flip, that's when you see big differences. So, well, Craig, as we're starting to run out of time, tell us about you're like a guest writer for the Bigger Pockets blog. I see your name when I did a quick Google as I was prepping for this of just my email inbox, right? It was like, oh, where's that interview notes for Craig? And all of your Bigger Pockets posts come up on the newsletter they send out. So you do a lot of, blog posts or stories for them. You've got your book that got published. What's next for you if people want to reach out to you, find you, talk to you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram. It's probably the best way. I'm at the Fi Guy on Instagram, or you can, if you want to work with us out in Denver, we're, thefiteam.com. And yeah, those are probably the best two places where, the social media that I actually check regularly. Yeah.
Very cool. So the Fi Guy on social media, if people want to invest in Denver, they want to learn more about it, they can go find your book, learn more about house hacking as they go out there. I really like getting to hear your perspective on the market, and really that analysis that you did at the end that just said like this, we're living through a weird time of economic ups and downs, but it's just a little bit different. It has been this year. it's been two different recoveries. There have been some people that have suffered a ton. The service industry people, I think most of those service industry people should become real estate agents because they've got real skills, real people skills right now, and maybe they'd do better in real estate. But the service industry has really struggled, but the finance sector has hardly any unemployment. One of the interesting articles we talked about a couple months ago was the fact that these interest rates keep getting lower and lower, but it's really only helping the people that were doing good already, like the people with no unemployment. The people that need it, the bartenders, the workers, it is harder for them to buy jobs because most of their income has always been kind of under the table, right? And so they're not getting to take advantage of those low rates right now. So a lot of interesting perspectives out there. Craig, I'm going to go follow you on Instagram too. We're going to be able to chat. The Real Estate Rockstars. Hopefully you guys had as good of a time listening to this as I did. I think I learned a lot and look forward to reaching out some more. So guys, thank you for listening. Craig, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks for having me.
All right, Real Estate Rockstars. This is Aaron Muchastegui jumping in again to thank you for listening to the show. Hopefully you guys loved listening to that one. And I want to make sure that you know about all of the extra resources that we have. And also we need your help. They say podcasts are free. You get to listen to podcasts for free. But what is the cost of that podcast? I would say if I could beg you to pay anything for that podcast, I would say the cost of the podcast is going and giving a review. So whether you download it on Google or Apple or YouTube or anywhere else, please go give us a review. Say what you liked, what you didn't like. It helps us get better guests. The more reviews, the higher we get in the rankings. Right now, we are the biggest podcast out there for real estate agents, and we want to keep that spot because we know there's lots of podcasts out there. So go give us a review. Also, be sure to go to hibandigital.com. If you liked any of the resources that those real estate agents talked about, we've got a huge video vault of those resources for free. Every penny that comes on the podcast that we interview, they give us something that helps them get their deals or helps them work with their clients. And we put that in the toolbox in our vault for you. So go to hibandigital.com and you can get it. If you're looking for real estate education, go to rebusuniversity.com. We have all sorts of courses in there to help agents succeed in real estate. How to get the listing, how to negotiate deals, how to become an investor, all sorts of different stuff, rebusuniversity.com. And if you want to chat with me, go find me on Instagram. And if you come find me on Instagram, you can send me messages. Tell me what you want to hear. Tell me what you liked, what you didn't like. We try to put a bunch of content out there too. You can find me in two different places. It's at rerockstars.com for our Real Estate Rockstars page, or at aaronmuchastegui.com for my personal Instagram page, where I can chat with you about all sorts of different things. Thanks for listening. We'll see you again soon.